Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So it's been a couple of weeks since I've made a video. I've been doing a lot of things. I've been interacting with a lot of people, and I've been interacting with people, on the internet in real life. And so my attempts to make a video have actually largely failed because I think, you know, it's like when you're doing one thing, you don't realize like that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're always thinking of, oh, I should be doing another thing, right? So there's this duality between is and ought. And there's actually no duality here, but like it comes down to intuition too. Like there's a sense in which it's not the right time for something. And you have to be able to intuitively recognize this. So, this is the problem with schedules. Okay, so but we'll get into this, and we talk about personal development. The What I want to do in the sort of videos after this is get more into self help and personal development things. Because I feel like this is the time of year where that feels like the right thing to do, right? So we can leverage that energy and do some of those videos without the intensity, I think, of a lot of self help and personal development videos, right? Because ultimately, you have to be inspired and on board to some degree with a relation, ideally, to make changes in your life. It's really hard to make changes on your own without support, right? So, I think that what I can do in the videos after this is like move more into sort of like personal development, self help topics, but from a more love perspective as opposed to a truth or a beauty perspective. I think what a lot of people are missing is love, actually. And I mentioned that like I feel like my duty basically in the last I don't know 6 months or so is to point to absolute truth and then ultimately to point to love, just as a cleavage point after absolute truth, right? Um, Maybe or maybe not, right? So I'm creating this on the spot. But I basically spent a couple of weeks on actualize.org and actuality of being, two communities that I am a member of and proud to be a member of. Um, and everybody who's involved in this, right? We're all basically, in my opinion, kind of a giant community. And obviously, I interact with people in real life, right? I don't want to make it seem like I'm a total hermit, although, to some extent, you can see that I am, right? Because I have a lot of interests that take me away from being entirely social, although I'm not averse to being social. So, to get back to what this, I think this, the value of this video to you would be is in 2019, I did Leo Gura's life purpose course. And I think in 2020, I did it again for a second time. I got a very similar life purpose both times. And my values were actually the same both times, except health increased the second time I did it, which isn't surprising, right? We could all do better with health. And that's basically what I think, health, finances, and relationships are the three things that I think are basic self help, personal development topics. And we can all do better in these, maybe or maybe not, right? Just depends on your circumstance. And it depends on like what you're like ready to work on too. So, uh, my first response on actualize.org was to list my top 10 values. But what was interesting this time is I didn't list the values that I had received on Leo Gura's life purpose course, through going, which I recommend, by the way. It was a different set of values, and I just spontaneously listed these. But the interesting thing is like, this was not just shit. You know what I'm saying? This was there's a I'm going to show you in this video. I'm going to unpack it. I'm going to show how the recognition of these values in this order actually has a logic to it that I didn't even know at the time. Like I basically unpacked it after the fact. So I'm going to show you what it is. And the question is like, what are your top 10 values? All right, so it's been like 6 years since I did Leo's Life Purpose course. So, I think I've basically implemented it to a certain extent. My life purpose basically is to be a personal development person, and all the facets of that. And I think I've done that to a large extent. I've interacted with a lot of you. I'm currently a life coach, right? I mean, I don't broadcast that widely. I don't want to broadcast that widely, but it's very true. I feel like, I'm here to basically advise anybody to the extent that I can. If I can't, I'll let you know. You know what I mean? I'm not going to push anything down anybody's throat. But without further ado, so this is basically what I came up with. My ideal top 10 values revisited. And you can see they are in a hierarchy, obviously. There's a paradox between hierarchy and no hierarchy, right? I mean, the lower, the numbers actually could be entirely mixed, and this would still be valid. But also, you can't take away the hierarchy from it, too. The hierarchy has a purpose, too, right? Because the higher stages are masculine, the middle stages are the marriage between the masculine and the feminine, and the lower stages are feminine, but you can mix higher and lower, right? So in other words, you can take the feminine stages and push them to the higher, and take the masculine stages and push them to the lower. So what I'm teaching you guys in a way is how to combine theory and practice. So with that in mind, right? Because look, everybody appreciates some theory. Let me get out of here. If you don't think that you are operating on philosophy on some level, come on, man. Everybody that I interact with is operating ultimately at the root level, which I have as my root of philosophy. You see? Number 10 is philosophy. That's my root because I majored in philosophy at UCLA. I got a degree in 2005 in philosophy, Western philosophy. And from that point to now, which has been scarily 20 years, I never stopped studying philosophy. Right? So philosophy is my underlying, it's like my root. I'm going to be the first person who's going to challenge anybody, right? Like you say something, I'm going to go like, okay, man, like define your terms. I try not to be too much this way, right? Because you can be a little bit too, right, much this way, which can be a problem with love and beauty, right? Because love is about maintaining relation. You don't want to be too truth oriented where you're butting up against maintaining relation. You can have a problem with love, or you're a bore, right? Because you're so interested in truth that you're really you come across as a clown, not a wit, or you come across as a bore, not a wit, right? So Aristotle had this theory of the bore versus the wit versus the clown. You don't want to be the bore or the clown. You want to be the wit, right, for Aristotle. So this is a theory of beauty or a theory of play. So, but ultimately, I think my root, paradoxically, is philosophy. And a lot of people will disagree with this. Will say, no, the root should be emotion, or the root should be direct experience, or the root should be God realization, or the root should be blah, 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 blah. Okay, good. Right? I'm not in conflict with you because I can move into love and I can realize that maintaining relation is higher than your philosophy, right? And ultimately, absolute truth is not philosophy. You can redefine philosophy to make it compatible with absolute truth, which is a kind of creation on your part, but ultimately, all you can do is point to absolute truth, right? Because no finite perspective ultimately is absolute truth. But anyway, I mean that, and realize everything I'm saying in this video, in a sense, is a series of pointers, a creation. Don't take what I'm saying as any kind of absolute truth. Like I'm taking you on a creative journey in this video. It's an improvisational journey. And ultimately, this is the first time that I've really felt like I was able to do this in 2 weeks, guys. I've tried to do this before this. It didn't feel right. This is the first time where I'm getting that flow, right? That's what you want, is you want flow, right? Even if it's wrong, it's still better to be like a minimalist with what you create, but create with flow and authenticity. So, and if you look at, you can see, so my root is philosophy, paradoxically, right? And then my sacral is music. Like ultimately, I'm a musician. No matter what I do, I'm a musician. I've been playing music my whole life. I've been listening to music my whole life. At this point, I'm kind of a musicologist. You know, I know a little bit about everything. And, you know, it's just like, you know, I have like taste standards with regard to me. You know, you're something when you have taste standards, no matter what kind of art form it is. It could be video games, it could be spiritual enlightenment, it could be writing, fiction, or, you know, whatever it is, right? Like you develop a taste in something because you spent your whole life focused on that. And that's ultimately what your sort of like energetic creation, you know, is best at. And for me, it's music, right? So sound ultimately is my passion, right? And then there's the solar plexus, and you can see here how I have personal development and authenticity listed for the solar plexus. Now, personal development is tricky. How many of us actually do what we say we will do, right? All of us know that self-help, personal development is something that we all have strengths and weaknesses that we're trying to sometimes activate if we see that there's a need that we want to do, right? Or a change that we want to make. If there's no change, there's no problem, right? No self, no problem. I mean, wouldn't that be great if that were actually true? And it is in part, right? We'll get into that when we get into absolute love. But personal development is, look, if you don't have your health, your finances, and your relationships together, maybe or maybe not, that might be something that you might want to work on. But you have to feel like you can change. And the problem with a lot of teachings is they disable this. The problem with a lot of the higher chakra, or higher masculine teachings, is they disable this feeling like you can change. Right? This is the person who's just been kind of spiritually hypnotized almost, right? They don't feel like they can change. They don't feel like they're a separate self. They don't feel like they're an ego. So you don't want to lose this, actually. You know, personal development, authenticity. Now, the thing with authenticity, everybody needs to realize everybody has a persona, right? You're only showing the best part of yourself normally, or what you think to be is the best part of yourself. You're not showing, if there was a video camera in your house that, or, you know, basically in your life that recorded everything you were doing all day long, that would be true authenticity. But from a social standpoint, you're basically performing an idealized authenticity. And this is what Jung was really smart in noticing. He called this persona. So paradoxically, it's important to have a value for authenticity, but also to realize the phoniness behind authenticity too, if you value truth. If you value love, you're going to realize everybody does this. And actually, you may even value this. You may say, look, man, everybody is inauthentic. So let's just have a party, right? Let's just be inauthentic actors together and, and do it that way. And that can swing on a pendulum, actually, between truth and love in that sense. Because love is about maintaining relation. So if everybody has a persona, right, the value of that, right, can vary between love and hate, or hate and love. Hate to the extent of truth, where you're trying to, get at the bottom of what is real, and love, where really the value is maintaining relation. So, so basically, the solar plexus. This is what is basically the human ego from like a person standpoint or a human standpoint is really about personal development and authenticity. See? Solar plexus. Now the heart chakra. This is the one that's actually I've been spending a lot of time on, and I love this one. It's amazing. But the heart chakra is about humor. Why? Because humor ultimately brings people together. Like, this is why humor is used in music too. This can be overdone and just in an awful way, right? It could be done like in clever, it's like Aristotle's distinction between being a bore, being a clown versus being a wit, right? So like what we appreciate is a balance. Humor can be awful, right? If somebody is stuck in truth, or maybe they're just in a real bad place with regard to personal development or authenticity, they're not going to have the abundance to be like fully humorous. Humor requires an abundance. It requires an energetic relation between the masculine and the feminine. And we're not always at this place. And sometimes we strive to be at this place when we're not authentically at this place, and it creates a problem, right? Like, don't ever assume that you need to be perfect, right? But when you're imperfect, you should be able to recognize why, right? Like, oh yeah, okay, like my heart is closed right now. It's not open. So notice that. So like number 6, that's like the highest form of the feminine, or, where the feminine meets the masculine, actually, the heart. So humor. Now, where the masculine meets the feminine is conscious creation. Notice that right in the middle. And I even designate this as the middle way. Okay. So this is just a model that I'm creating, guys. I'm not saying this is correct, but this is a really fascinating model, actually. It came right out of that post that I made, the first post I made on Actualize when I listed my top 10 values. I'm like, wow, this fits all this like theory. I couldn't believe it. And it's not about belief. Just, in part, it is about creation, but it's like, wow, these models really kind of fit here. So conscious creation. What is conscious creation? Well, conscious creation is the throat chakra, which is the lowest level of the masculine chakras. The throat chakra, deciding what to say, deciding what to post, deciding what to communicate, conscious creation, right? I notice a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, including myself in the past, and probably, obviously like moving into the future, are going to continually post or communicate things that are insensitive, untrue, without heart, without beauty, and without wisdom. Let's just say it like that, right? All of us are going to do that. That should be expected on some level. What we're talking about here is my ideal top 10 values, not my top 10 values, right? Not top 10 values for everybody else. It's ideal, right? So there's a duality between is and ought that is not real. So in other words, if you fall into I got to do what is, you miss the ideal. That it's important to value the ought. If you're too focused on the ought, then you miss the is. Oh, what is the case? Wow, there's all these predatory people out there and so on and so forth, but that's from a certain perspective too. But from a throat chakra standpoint, and notice I call these two the middle way, so humor and conscious creation, right? So like if you just want to be safe, right, these are the two, the middle way is from the feminine angle, humor, from the masculine angle, conscious creation. And this is just, going to kind of be the focal point probably for a lot of you who really struggle with the individual versus the relation, right? The solo flyer versus the, community member, right? You're going to want to focus here, right in the middle. And so what I'm going to do, friends, I'm going to take a break. I'll come back and then we'll discuss the masculine stages. So just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So the masculine stages are going to be 1 through 4 on here, okay? So it's going to be absolute truth, absolute love, absolute beauty, and absolute wisdom. And so you can see how absolute truth, absolute love, absolute beauty are the third eye, and then absolute wisdom is the crown chakra, right? So let me explain how these work. So notice that absolute truth is not philosophy, right? See, this is the distinction between the masculine and the feminine. The feminine is about what, why, who, what, why, when, where, how, right? Because the feminine is focused on grounding. See, the masculine is focused on understanding. So this is where we get into how do we slice and dice this understanding up, right? That's what the masculine is concerned with at the highest level. We can say no, everything is one, or we can say, just like you can play a chord, which is one, even though it has multiple notes to it, right? You can play a chord, it's one, or you can arpeggiate a chord. You can play 1, 2, 1, 3, 5, 7, right? If you know anything about music, you can arpeggiate a chord. And scales are actually, in a way, an arpeggiation of chords. You can have a chord scale in music, ultimately, which is just a pool of available notes that make up a chord. It may not be necessarily harmonic, right? In other words, like it may not sound good to the ears. Like if you played like a chord all the way through diatonically, it may not sound great. But ultimately, the concept is that there's one versus the many, and the many versus the one. So in other words, like you can think of absolute wisdom as the interplay between absolute truth, absolute love, and absolute beauty. You can think of. Are you going to feel this? Well, no, because feeling is feminine. See, feeling is about humor, authenticity, personal development, music, philosophy. Feeling is what we talked about before. The masculine is about thinking. This is the thing, and people who have a problem with the masculine, like they don't like thinking, right? People have a problem with the feminine, they don't like feeling. And it's just, the masculine is about understanding. So I've decided to break these things into parts. And the triad that make up the third eye in this model for me are absolute truth, absolute love, and absolute beauty. So let me explain these. And obviously, I'm creating this too. Realize that. And I'm very conscious of this. This is not your truth. Ultimately, this is just a creation. It's a model. It's a performance, actually. But then I feel like this is something worth communicating to you too. It's not just a performance. It's not a comedy act, right? See, when we get too focused on beauty or play, we get too wrapped up in everything has to be funny. And then that becomes a burden, right? That becomes like, okay, well, no, wisdom is not everything has to be funny. Because if you do that too long, it becomes boring too, right? We want to go back to love. We want to go back to truth. So the way I see it is that wisdom is the interplay between truth, love, and beauty. So you can see here, wisdom is the crown chakra, or the highest value that I have, right? So it's the interplay between truth, love, and beauty. And the way that I define absolute truth is not philosophy. This is going to offend a lot of you guys, right? You want to make absolute truth philosophy. You want to redefine philosophy to create absolute truth. I would say this is groupthink. Right? You're sharing, you're not realizing that, and you're not realizing what absolute truth is. Absolute truth is, it's not philosophy. It's determined internally for each particular person. Okay. Absolute love, which I have as positioned higher than absolute truth, is maintaining relation. And this one can be difficult too, especially people who are like dishonest, right? They shame you, they lie about you. It's you, and you realize, okay, well, maybe there is no me, right? Because you got to get along with everybody. And this is where watching your reactivity becomes an issue. This is something I learned a lot with Actuality of Being, actually. And it's really powerful, is allowing everybody to be here and to express themselves in the way that they do, even if they challenge you. Right? But also, paradoxically, maintaining relation too. You know, not getting scared, not like overreacting because somebody doesn't like you, somebody disagrees with you, somebody has something nasty to say about you. It's like, okay, well, you know, I mean, it's not the end of the world, right? So absolute love. And people are going to have different truths that you're going to have to stomach, right? I mean, that's basically what absolute love is. Absolute beauty, it's about play. Now, you may say to yourself, I got some notes here too that will conclude this, but you may say to yourself, well, you know, absolute beauty is the highest value. Here's the problem with absolute beauty or play is that the creation of drama becomes a job. But it can be a labor of love too. But don't underestimate that putting on a performance is a job. So in a way, that's kind of groupthink too, right? You're marketing. Like even if you're a band, you're playing a concert, that's a job. You're not always doing that, right? Sometimes you're sleeping, sometimes you're taking a shower, sometimes you're hanging out with your friends, sometimes you're reading a book, right? You're not always on. You're not always performing. So there's got to be a value that's higher than absolute beauty, even though absolute beauty is play, and we all enjoy play. And I believe that beauty is higher than truth and higher than love. The highest value is, for me here, the crown chakra, is absolute wisdom. So absolute wisdom is the interplay between these and not even. right? It's the ability to move into absolute truth or absolute love or absolute beauty and not even to. Like you just, sometimes you're just a guy, right? Or sometimes you're not even that, right? You're asleep or whatever, you know, sometimes maybe there's no separate self, you know, whatever it is. Okay, friends, so hopefully this was useful. And actually, to conclude this video, the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I've actually found this to be sort of theory that I can live by, right? I mean, not entirely, because we understand the limitations of theory and so on, but this was something that I was surprised to see had this much depth to it when I, started kind of, well, first I made the list, and then I was like, okay, well, it kind of fits the chakras too, which is, surprised me. And then it seemed like, there's a lot that can be unpacked. Like it's like a good outline for a video, because I can outline my comments on each particular thing. So it comes almost like a table of contents, right, for a creation of a video. So it was just useful in that way. So hopefully this was a good video, guys. And I want to make some videos on personal development and self-help, moving into the new year, which I think, all of us can find useful. But I want to do it with my own kind of touch. I don't want to be too heavy-handed with that, right? So you got to know how to, with self-help and personal development, I mean, the key is motivation, right? So, and energy. So you have to be coming at that at the right place and the right time, right? So that's what I'm conscious of. But I definitely want to do some more videos along those lines, moving into the first part of this year. That way we can all, figure out a way to get our health together, get our finances together, get our relationships together, at least a nudge in the, positive direction there. That's important to me, and I think it's important to other people too. And, my goal is to be a good sort of like steward of that, or, that makes it like not, sort of like that tries to make it accessible to everybody. Okay, friends, hopefully this is a good video. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.